The Metal Slug series has been around since 1996, when the first game published by SNK was released for the Neo Geo MVS. It was a run and gun that saw you take control of soldiers Marco Rossi and Tama Rovin on a mission to prevent a coup d'etat by the rebel army. It's had many sequels over the years, and Metal Slug Attack, a spin-off game released for mobile back in 2016. It dropped immediately after the recent Nintendo Direct, rebranded as Metal Slug Attack Reloaded. But is it metal enough for you to play, or is it all just a bit sluggish? Well, let's find out. So in terms of the story then, well, it appears to be a bit of a retelling of that first game, albeit taking characters and ideas from the subsequent games as well. Once again, General Morden of the rebel group is trying to create a new world order, with Marco Rossi and Tama Rovin trying to stop him. Characters from sequels such as Eri and Fiolina also join the party this time round, and there are actually 5 factions involved in the story, with a host of characters interacting with each other via cutscenes consisting of static images between each of the game's chapters. So onto the gameplay now, and this is where the biggest change comes in terms of what most people might expect a Metal Slug game to look like. This is not a run and gun, it's actually a tower defense game. At its most basic level, you will have a base on the left hand of the screen for each of the stages, with the enemy having a base at the right hand side. As time passes through each stage, you will gain AP or action points, and you can then use these to purchase characters to move from your base to the right of the screen and ultimately attack the enemy's base. If the enemy's base's health is brought down to 0, the stage is over and you go on to the next. Of course, if your base is the one whose health is brought down to 0, you'll fail the mission and have to retry. Each of the units have their own stats, close and ranged attacks, special attacks and AP value. You'll start with just a few units, being the 4 main characters I've just mentioned, as well as a very basic grunt soldier, but you'll be able to purchase around 300 different unit types as you get further into the game, and we'll discuss all of that in a moment. So obviously the enemy will be sending out units from their base too, and your units will meet on the battlefield, which will sway the way of the battle. It can feel like a bit of a pendulum swinging on a grandfather clock at times, with you in the ascendancy before being pushed back as your enemy sends out their units, and you'll need to keep an eye on your AP to make sure that you are sending units out regularly enough to stem that tide. You can purchase more AP points by pressing the L button when you have enough. This increases the cap for the amount of points you're able to have at any one time during that level, meaning that you can purchase higher priced units when they become available. You can permanently upgrade this cap, and again we'll talk about that in a moment. So victory in stages will earn you 2 types of in-game currency. You'll get medals and you'll get MSP or Metal Slug points. Looking at the medals first, this is how you purchase new unit types. Going into the Call to Arms button, which is unlocked a couple of levels in, you'll be able to spend your medals in gacha game style, with you being given a random assortment of new characters for the points you've spent. Again, these will all have their own unique attacks, and it's vital that you have a vast array of characters, as certain levels can seem almost impossible without a particular unit whose attack counteracts that of the enemies for that stage. Moving on to MSP then, you can use these to upgrade or level up each individual unit. You can also use these points to upgrade your base, increasing your health points so you don't get taken out so quickly, increasing the speed at which AP builds, which is also very useful, or increasing the amount of MSP you get at the end of a stage. In my experience, it was important not to hoard this currency and spend it liberally, even if it does mean grinding for more, because you will need it to get through the game. The game spikes at times to an unbelievable level. There were stages where I felt that strategy was key. I would try sending out smaller units in larger numbers to try and overwhelm the enemy, only for these to be taken out quite quickly, but would find that saving up my AP to purchase a more powerful unit from the off actually made more sense. Other times it would be the complete reverse, for example, and I liked this element of strategy in getting through the levels. However, as I did mention briefly a moment ago, there are certain stages where the difficulty just spikes, and I do feel at times that RNG does play a massive part in this game. There were a couple of stages that I must have tried 30-40 times to just be completely annihilated no matter which strategy I tried, and ultimately it came down to going to that gachapon machine mechanic, ploughing in my medals to receive a number of different units, trying these out or looking at their moves to see if there was one that would counteract the enemies I was facing on this particular stage, using my MSP to then level them up to a decent standard, and trying the stage again to see what happens. Eventually just overcoming the enemy on a bit of a wing and a prayer almost, having had that luck of receiving a decent unit via the call to arms. Now this is a mechanic of these type of games, and I must admit it is pretty addictive with that gacha type mechanic, receiving new units and trying them out in battle. My issue with it is that it does, at times in my opinion at least, come at the expense of any real strategy. Outside of the levels I mentioned where it did feel that you could genuinely make a difference with the resources you had, at other times it was literally a case of chucking all your in-game currency into whatever you could, throwing it all at the wall and seeing what stuck. I will give the game credit though that when I mention losing 30-40 times in a row, that was consecutive times. Why is that credit to the game? Well, I kept pressing retry, so it must have been doing something right. I won't pretend that the air wasn't turning blue by the expletives that I was muttering as I pressed that retry button, but I retried nonetheless. I do feel a better balance between strategy and the need to upgrade or purchase new units, and a better use of RNG in terms of what units you get would make this game a better experience for everybody, but there will be people that absolutely love this type of gameplay and just can't get enough of it. On the flip side, there'll be people it just doesn't resonate with at all and will be a major turn off. Moving on to controls then, and for the most part they are fine. You have no direct control over your units. Instead, you'll use up and down on the D-pad to cycle through the units you have available at the bottom, pressing A to create them once you have enough AP. You can hover over their picture and press B to use their specific special move once they are highlighted in blue, or you can press the Y button to use everyone's special move at once, again if they have that blue hue. Pressing R will use your team special move if you like, not one specific to a character. And as I said, it does work okay. There are two major issues I have with the controls, the first of which relates to the individual special moves, in that it is quite difficult at times to keep a track of who you have on the field, to hover over their image to use their specific attacks. I found myself pressing the Y button and using everyone's attacks at once most of the time, which wasn't really ideal, as some of the attacks wouldn't have been useful at that moment, but it was the lesser of two evils. In handheld mode you can use the touchscreen, which does alleviate this to a degree, but it's still not ideal. And the other major issue I have is that there is no retry stage button. Instead you have to quit a level and go back in. Trust me, in a game where you're retrying stages so many times, at times it's obvious quite quick you're going to lose. It would be nice to have this option. Gameplay is a very difficult one to explain. I hope I've done a decent enough job of giving you a brief idea of how it works, because it will really determine how much you enjoy the game. There are other mechanics at play, quite a few more to be fair. Things such as using the items that you get from hostages you save, and evolving units by using the doubles that you get from the call to arms section. On the whole though, it's that RNG nature and the huge difficulty spikes that you'll need to decide how you feel about. For me, glutton for punishment I suppose, I kept pressing retry, and gameplay gets 14 out of 20. Controls, as I mentioned, are okay, although there are a few niggles that got to me. They get 13 out of 20. When it comes to the visuals, Attack Reloaded evokes feelings of traditional Metal Slug pixel art. The characters will look as you remember if you've ever played Metal Slug before, all the way down to the hostages having those classic scruffy beards. And outside of the classic characters from the series, you do have a wild and eclectic range of new units to use as you go on. These aren't just your standard soldier types, as the factions go from more realistic to quite outlandish, and you'll have ancient Egyptian bodyguards and gelatinous aliens by the time you're done. The animations are also quite smooth, and the backgrounds do change as you go through each of the worlds, meaning there's a decent amount of variety, and I didn't have any performance issues as I played through. In terms of the audio, it's very reminiscent again of the classic Metal Slug games, using some of the themes from the original games in the series, and it does evoke a nice level of nostalgia as you play through. There is also a gallery mode that unlocks with a variety of still images and a music player included too, both of which are nice touches. To be honest, visuals were exactly what I expected and hoped they would be. Being a nice callback to the classic games of the past, I do think Metal Slug is a series in general that has aged incredibly well anyway in terms of its aesthetic, and they look just as good today as they did then, in my opinion. Visuals receive 17 out of 20. By the same token, I could say exactly that of the audio, which will definitely make you smile as you hear certain themes, and it's just as well because you'll be replaying certain levels a whole lot, that's for sure. Audio also receives 17 out of 20. Metal Slug Attack Reloaded costs £8.99 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. For this price you are getting a lengthy campaign. To be honest, there's no point me trying to put a number on it because of the nature of how the gameplay is. Some people will get stuck on certain stages for so long, it makes my use of putting a time to it completely academic. By the same token, the RNG nature could mean that you get the exact units you need for a particular stage every time you use the gachapon machine, and you'll fly through stages that others are stuck on for a long time. It does have that addictive quality, and that has to be said, and credit to the game for this, because even in the most frustrating moments, even when I was cursing just how difficult certain stages felt, even when I had to go back to the call to arms button, get a whole bunch more units, replay older levels to grind for MSP to then level them up, etc, etc, I still did this and I didn't do it begrudgingly. I acknowledged that it was a bit silly that you had to keep doing this, but I didn't feel I was going through the motions, I was still enjoying the game. That won't be the same for everyone, and that's a very important point to articulate. There is also an online mode and other modes to be added, judging by the announcements shown on the menu screen. Whether these will be free updates or DLC in the future, I don't know, but $8.99 is a very good price if you can stomach having to replay certain levels so many times. On balance, value gets 17 out of 20. To conclude, Metal Slug Attack Reloaded is a very difficult game to review because whilst I can give you my opinion on how I felt playing it, I think the most important part of what I'm saying is to listen to the game's mechanics, especially revolving around RNG, grinding, difficulty spikes and gacha style mechanics, and decide yourself whether that sounds fun. This is true of most reviews of course, but I do feel certain games really do step above the mark and need to push home that point because the numbers are almost pointless if the gameplay just isn't for you. If you've played games like this in the past and enjoyed them, this is a great one and you'll have a lot of fun with its addictive but flawed gameplay. Metal Slug Attack Reloaded gets a SwitchUp score of 78%. Thank you everybody for watching this review, I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you found it useful. Like I say, almost ignore the number at the end to be perfectly honest, listen to the words because it will give you a better understanding of the game and whether it's a game for you. Don't forget to give it a like though if you did find it useful, and don't forget if you are looking for eShop credit to pick this game up or any other game for that matter, you can get your eShop cards over at our website switchup.gg, and doing so will get you 5% of your purchase price back as cashback. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.